This Friday falls on the 13th, and of course, Friday the 13th has quite a bit of lore about it. One was a Norse myth about 12 gods having a dinner party in Valhalla. Loki, who was not invited, arrived as the 13th guest and arranged for Hodor to shoot Balder with a mistletoe-tipped arrow, which killed him, and the whole earth got dark. Or the story of Jesus' Last Supper before his crucifixion, in which there were 13 people present. Some think that the arrest of the Knights Templar on Friday the 13th in 1307 by King Philip as the origin of the superstition. But the most horrifying of them all took place on Friday the 13th at Camp Crystal Lake. In 1957, a young boy named Jason Voorhees drowned while at the camp. A year later, two camp counselors sneak inside the cabin to have sex, and someone murders them. So that camp closed, with people claiming it was cursed. In 1979, the camp was reopened, and new counselors arrived, and on Friday the 13th, they were killed off, one by one, in ghastly ways. Even Kevin Bacon. Then the remaining counselor, Alice, finds out that this killer is Mrs. Voorhees, Jason's mother, who wants revenge for her son. In a final struggle, Alice beheads Mrs. Voorhees and paddles out into the lake as the police arrive. Then a boy comes out of the water, pulling her in. She awakes in the hospital, but no one's seen any boy, which ends the horrific story of Jason Voorhees. Until 1981, Part 2. 2 months later, Alice is recovering from her experience. Then she finds the severed head of Mrs. Voorhees, and she's killed by an unknown intruder. 5 years later, the camp is reopened for a fresh start, and the counselors begin being killed off again. The last two, Paul and Ginny, come upon an old cabin in the woods where they find Mrs. Voorhees' rotting head on an altar. Ginny thinks she killed Jason with a machete, but he later crashes through a window. She awakens in an ambulance, and Jason is gone and probably now dead. Until 1982, Part 3. Jason's still roaming around the woods of Crystal Lake and killing anyone he comes across. One guy with a group of teens has a hockey mask he used to scare people, and in a seminal moment, Jason finds and dons the mask, then goes back to the bloodshed. The last survivor, Chris, in their final battle, hits Jason in the head with an axe, ending the absolute horror of Jason Voorhees. Until 1984, the final chapter. Jason's dead body is taken to the morgue, but he was only unconscious, and his massacre continues. He makes his way back to Crystal Lake and comes across a woman with two kids, one named Tommy Jarvis, and it's little Corey Feldman. Tommy tries to trick Jason by dressing like him, then goes in for the kill. And the world is saved from this brutal killer. Not saved by the military, or police, or the science, but by Corey Feldman. Until 1985, a new beginning. 5 years after killing Jason Voorhees, a teenage Tommy Jarvis, who this time is not Corey Feldman, is tormented by nightmares of the mass murderer, and now lives in a halfway house for troubled teens. One of the guys gets angry at the other guy and smacks him with an axe. The ambulance takes the body away. Jason wasn't done with Tommy. He shows up and begins hacking up everyone. Tommy and Jason end up in a fight. Then Tommy cuts off Jason's hand. He falls out of the barn and is impaled on spikes. His mask falls off, revealing that it wasn't Jason, but the ambulance driver, who was the father of the bully who was killed. He wanted revenge on that halfway house, so he pretended to be Jason, thus proving that Jason Voorhees was actually dead. Until 1986, Jason lives. Tommy Jarvis, who is still not Corey Feldman, is released from a hospital for the criminally insane. He returns to Crystal Lake to confront his fears. He goes to Jason's grave with Horseshack during a thunderstorm. Intending to cremate his body, after digging up Jason's corpse, Tommy impales Jason's body with a metal fence post. Lightning bolts strike the post, and this brings Jason back to life with superhuman strength, and Jason begins butchering everyone again, including Horseshack. Tommy lures Jason back to Crystal Lake, then ties a chain and a boulder around his neck, trapping him underwater, ending the maniacal run of Jason Voorhees. Until 1988, The New Blood. After witnessing her alcoholic father abusing her mother, a young Tina attempts to escape home and heads out into Crystal Lake in a boat. When her father follows her in an attempt to stop her, Tina's dormant telekinetic abilities emerge and she accidentally destroys the dock her father is standing on, causing him to drown. Years later, Tina is still struggling with remorse. At their house, her psychiatrist begins a series of verbal assaults designed to agitate Tina's mental state, forcing her powers to become more pronounced. Tina runs to the dock, wishing her father would come back. Her powers unwittingly awaken Jason Voorhees, and it's off to mayhem and murder. In the final battle, Tina and Jason are at the lake outside her house. Tina unleashes her powers, breaking Jason's mask, which exposes his decomposed face. Although Tina is unable to kill Jason, she unknowingly summons the spirit of her father, who rises from the lake and drags Jason back down with him into the depths of Crystal Lake, ending the tyrannical run of Jason Voorhees. Until 1989, Jason takes Manhattan. While aboard a houseboat on Crystal Lake, a teenager tells his girlfriend about the legend of Jason Voorhees. The boat's anchor damages some underwater cables that shock Jason's corpse, reviving him, which pretty much ends their cruise. Then Jason gets on another boat where there's a party of people heading to New York. So the slaughter continues. Jason's now in New York, ends up in a sewer, and a girl throws toxic waste in his face, which starts to melt. The wastewater overcomes Jason, washing his body away, drowning the monstrous and evil Jason Voorhees. Until 1993, Jason goes to hell. Jason Voorhees ended up not drowning in a New York sewage. He returns to Crystal Lake and stalks a lone woman. The woman, who is an undercover FBI agent, lures Jason into an ambush where agents obliterate his body. Jason's remains are sent to a morgue where his still beating heart entices the coroner to eat it, allowing Jason's soul to possess him. And the human extermination begins as he possesses other people along the way. Meanwhile, a bounty hunter discovers that only members of Jason's bloodline can permanently kill him. Jason will return to his near invincible state if he possesses a family member. The only living relatives of Jason are his half-sister, her daughter, and a granddaughter. So that's where Jason is headed. The bounty hunter has a mystical dagger that can kill Jason permanently. So those women, the bounty hunter, and Jason have a final fight. The bounty hunter gets killed, but the ladies manage to stab Jason, and as the souls Jason accumulated are released, demonic hands burst out of the ground and pull Jason into hell. Later, a dog unearths Jason's mask. Freddy Krueger's laugh is heard, and his gloved hand reaches out from the dirt, pulling Jason's mask into hell, and Jason Voorhees is left to rot in hell for all eternity. Until 2002, Jason X. In 2008, Jason Voorhees is captured by the US government and held at a Crystal Lake research facility. By 2010, after numerous failed attempts to kill Jason, government scientists want to put him in a cryogenic stasis. But some want to research Jason's ability to heal from lethal wounds, as they believe it involves rapid cellular regeneration that can be replicated. Jason breaks free of his restraints, and the slayings begin again. One scientist lures him into a cryogenic pod and activates it, but he ruptures the pod with his machete and stabs her. Cryogenic fluid spills into the sealed room, freezing them both. Around 445 years later, Earth has become too polluted to support human life, and humans move to a new planet, Earth 2. On a field trip to Earth 1, scientists explore the abandoned Crystal Lake research facility, finding the frozen Jason and scientist. They bring them aboard their spaceship and revive the scientist, leaving Jason in the morgue, believing he's dead. Of course, he's not dead, and exterminates everyone he comes across. Jason gets blown up, but the medical station nanites rebuild Jason, who becomes a cyborg. Jason finally gets blown into the atmosphere and is incinerated. On Earth 2, a pair of teenagers are by a lake when they see what they believe is a falling star. They go to investigate as Jason's charred mask sinks to the bottom of the lake, ending the long, horrific career of Jason Voorhees. Until 2003, Freddy vs. Jason. Since his last defeat, Freddy Krueger has been in hell, unable to invade children's dreams, as the adults have gone to extremes to ensure their children forget about him. Freddy resurrects Jason and appears as Jason's mother, Mrs. Voorhees, to manipulate him into thinking his mother wants him to go to Elm Street and kill. This will create fear that Freddy has returned, allowing him to regain his power. Jason commits mass murder, Freddy comes back, they fight. Freddy stabs Jason with his machete, then gets stabbed by Jason with Freddy's claws, because Jason tore Freddy's arm off and the girl beheads Freddy. They both sink into the water, dead, ending the catastrophic life of Jason Voorhees. Until 2009, the remake, which is the only one of these I've never watched. I've seen some clips on YouTube, and I guess it combines some of the first 3 movies. Jason sees his mother get beheaded, he kills people, he gets killed. Once and for all, finally, at long last, ending the repulsive and horrendous career of Jason Voorhees. Until next time, good night.